Hello. Welcome to TNT Matter of Fact. I am Dr. Ebony Thompson.
And I am Dr. James Thompson.
And we're going to have straight talk about real world views through experiential lens. And if you could give our first episode a title, I guess you would say it was called Who We Are. And so this episode will be titled?
I would have to say it would be titled How We Got There.
How We Got There. And so you want to start us off?
So I would say it's pretty easy for me. How I got there, I talked a little bit about where I tried to go initially into working with health and human services, and wasn't able to transition into that field, and actually started off trying to get a substitute job with the Kansas City School District, and ended up having a conversation with a gentleman named Walter Kuba. He was the supervisor of special education at the time. This is way back in 2001. So had a conversation with him, and he asked if I was interested in teaching special education, and sure, I'm interested in having a job. So took advantage of the opportunity, got into special education, went back and got my certification in special education, and just ended up loving it. Loved spending time with students, and being able to take information and knowledge that I had and impart it to someone else. It was just an amazing thing. And I'm already a history guy, and love talking about that. And so it was like an opportunity for me to take something that I enjoyed doing and transition it into my work life. So that's really how I got into education. And I was really young at the time that I had that conversation with Mr. Kuba. I was actually 21 years old. So
fresh out.
Yeah, young man, and
of high school.
Out of high school. And it's funny, initially they were going to send me to Camden High School as a special education teacher, and then they realized we can't send this guy who's almost the same age as them to the school. So,
right, because not fresh out of high school, fresh out of college, excuse me.
Fresh out of college. So right. I ended up starting off at Pine Point Middle School. So
I went there.
Not at the same time that I was teaching there.
I did not.
Just missed each other. So that was really how I got into education. Started off as a pivot and turned into a passion.
I like it. Mm-hmm. So I always tell my story about how I got into education. I always say by accident, because even when I was young, even when I was in Pine Point Middle School, if I still had my yearbook, it would say that I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. Mm. I just knew I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to defend people. I was going to tell people why I was right. I'm very good at arguing the right way. And so, so that was my path. That's what I thought. But if you watch the last episode, you'll hear a lot of what I talked about and how I lacked the guidance and proper direction and how to actually even get there. And so now that I think about, as long as I've been in education, had I gone that route, would I be happy? And I don't think that I would, because got into education completely by happenstance. And so about 16 years ago now, I was doing freelance graphic design, and that's a passion. It's turned into a business, and a lot of times my sister will say that I turned a conversation into a career. So we wanted to have our, I want to say it was 20-year high school reunion at the time, and was it 20 years? No, 10-year high school reunion. Aging myself. We wanted to have our 10-year high school reunion. And so went back to the school to talk to the principal at the time, who happened to be an instructional assistant when I was in Pine Point. And so when it was realized that I did this work with graphic design, Woodrow Wilson had this program, and it was the Xerox Kate graphic print program. And so I actually started volunteering, and I would volunteer at the school. And at the time I was in retail, I was selling furniture, and I would volunteer at the school. I would go to the school before it was time for me to go to work. And so when I started doing that, and then I started doing different publications for the school and kind of getting to know everybody around the building. And I never even, at this time, I didn't even have a college degree. And so started doing work around the school, started talking to different administrators and kind of just, rubbing elbows, so to speak, with those individuals, and was encouraged to go back to school to continue my education or my post-secondary journey. And I did. And at the time was going from, so started volunteering, ended up turning that into a part-time job, which ended up being a full-time job eventually. And I continued to just work and go to school, from associates all the way to my doctorate degree. Starting out in education, I never would have imagined that if you would have told me years ago I would be a teacher, I would be an administrator, I would have told you, yeah, right. I don't even like kids. And that's probably what I really would have said. However, a chance meeting turned into something that has been so rewarding for me, and it really pushed me into my purpose and my passion. Like you said, when I started out in the class, it was natural for me. I had no formal training. Like I said, I didn't even have a college degree. And so I'm teaching these students, and I'm in my early 20s, mid 20s, and just like you, they're not that much younger than I am. Mm-hmm. And so, but I was horrible at first. I had the classroom management has always been my knack. So I didn't have issues with that, but I didn't have balance. And so I was going at kids like, you gonna listen to me, because I had this idea that I'm young and I got to make sure. And so, funny enough, my little nickname was Bruja. And so, those students,
what does that mean?
That means witch. Yeah, I didn't have balance. However, those students ended up being some of my favorite pupils, and I became some of their favorite teacher once I found the balance, because they realized that it wasn't that I was being mean out of being malicious. I wanted the best for them. I wanted them to learn what I taught myself, what was a God-given talent for me. And I didn't know, again, didn't have that formal training, any other way to deliver that, to send that message across. And it was a little bit rough. And so I wouldn't say I struggled, because the teacher that I worked with, Mr. Burgos, who was like a work dad to me, he helped me out a lot. And eventually he would give me the show. Like, would you got something for these guys today? And I'm like, wait a minute, you're the teacher. Mm-hmm. I always had something for them though, but it just became so natural for me. And I've been doing it ever since. And so then I couldn't even imagine, even going to school, I didn't even imagine that I'd be an administrator right away. I didn't even know what kind of teacher I wanted to be. I knew I loved graphics, and eventually I knew I loved teaching, and I loved teaching life skills, because that became a big part. And, when we got to Philly, mm-hmm. that was a big part of what we did. And so that was how my journey began. So
I guess I didn't necessarily plan to go into education. Like I said, I had different ideas, but I did have the opportunity to take some education classes when I was at Rutgers. And so being able to take some classes, I did take some lesson planning classes. I did take some classroom management classes. While anybody that says that out the gates they were just absolutely amazing is probably lying. I did have a foundation in some of the coursework to be able to lean on. And while I did have some of the coursework, anybody will tell you that what you do in a classroom versus, what you learn in a book, a lot of times is completely different. And so you have to be able to take that and use that, modify it to fit your situation. And so that was what I was able to do. But with going into education, there were a lot of perks for me, when I first got into it. The idea that I was only responsible for doing what I was doing for 10 months out of the year. It's a beautiful thing. 2 months off in the summer, and
Winter break.
Yeah,
Spring
always
break.
winter break, spring break, all the national holidays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were just so many reasons to, really just kind of stick with it. And so when I got into it, it was like, I really like doing this. This makes a lot of sense. When my kids don't have school, I don't have school. It just made a lot of sense. And so once I identified the fact that this is something that I could see myself doing long term, I started to invest in it. And so initially, I went back to school and got my master's in counseling, in school counseling. Got certified as a school guidance counselor. Almost immediately after completing the program, I had a conversation with my administrator at the time, Mr. Danny Edwards at Pine Point Middle School. He said that there's no way I should not be looking into getting into administration. And I told him, I just finished up my master's degree for counseling. I'm not really looking to go into administration. I said, I'm too young for that. And he said, you're never too young to plan for your future.
Mm-hmm.
And so right back to school I went, and had the opportunity while I was going to school for my school leadership degree. Got to transition to, it's big picture now, BPLA now, but it was Med East. And so I was the first teacher hired to Med East. Tim, one of my best friends, Tim Jenkins, was the principal. We had so few students that the district would not make him a principal. At the time, he had to be assistant principal until we had more grade levels. But loading up my car, moving things all around, getting the building set up, I got to be a part of starting something from scratch. And what I realized in my time with Med East was that students needed a hook. They needed something that they were connecting themselves to. For some students in education itself is the thing that keeps them going. It drives them. The grades or the content, whatever it is, in education, that's what drives them. But for other students, that a lot of that stuff is boring. They have no interest in it. They can't relate it to their everyday life, and so
or their future,
or where they're going. Yeah. And so I realized that there has to be something else, for the student that's not necessarily going to just come to school to go to school. And so this particular school focused on internships where students got to really delve into their passion, find out what they wanted to do later in life, find out what they didn't want to do later in life. If you say you want to be a doctor, and then we get you into a situation where you get to see, a cadaver and
you pass out
or you throw up, like you may want to, really reconsider. And, it could be a fluke that first time, but if every time you get into that situation, it's like you just can't overcome it. You succumb to those feelings, and you may need to, take another look at other possibilities. Also, if you don't like to read, you were talking about being a lawyer. A lot of people don't realize that being a lawyer is almost all about reading and understanding
research.
Law,
yes.
Understanding case law, understanding, the past, to be able to, apply it to the current situation. And so that's when I really built a passion for career and technical education. And so I had the opportunity to very briefly work at Camden County College. And there were all different types of students that came through Camden County College, all different types of backgrounds, different spaces and places in their lives. So it really made me change how I thought about education. When you have a 60-year-old mother who always wanted to go to school but never had the opportunity, now in class with an 18-year-old, it was like a shift in how I looked at education, what education meant. And so I returned to the district and actually got transitioned into career and technical education and post-secondary readiness. And that has really been, in some way, shape, or form, my driving my driving force or passion behind how I support and motivate students, using that as a vehicle, tying it to something that they can see themselves, a part of. A lot of times you talk about athletes and, you know, having a conversation with them, eventually your physical attributes, they fade.
Absolutely.
And so when you can't jump up and grab a rim or, throw a football 50 yards or
sprint like you used to,
sprint, when those things go away, you have to have something. And so having that conversation with students, what is that going to be? And, talking about something that they could see themselves doing, for the rest of their life. Having the conversation about, for a lot of students when I got into career and technical education, being able to do basic things to fix a car, or being able to, print a brochure, or, being able to design a computer game. All of those things were things that students had available to them. And to see students enter into that arena and, see them light up, see a kid who cut 3 or 4 classes that day,
but come to that one,
make their way to that class.
Yes.
It was clear that when they were invested in whatever it was that they, had a passion for or were interested in, it changed how they viewed education. They wanted to learn.
They were present, physically and mentally.
And so my drive has become figuring out how you make what happens on a regular basis, the things we have to do, the things that the state's looking for, the math components, the literacy components, the science components. How do you make that connect to those career pieces, those programs that allow a student to be able to explore that? And so that's really been, my push. I had the opportunity to work with the Department of Education, actually directing that department. And so understanding the value of programs like that, especially for students where we're from.
Absolutely.
It was, a shift for me at that time that changed everything.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so funny because, we talk about education all the time. You know that, like, most of our conversations are, what happened at work or just different things surrounding education. And just to hear you talk about the CTE component and, a part of me perks up because that's how I got into education.
That's where I first met you.
Right. Exactly. And so, had that not been available, I don't know where I would be. Like, what would have been the vehicle for me to push me into that position? Because even though my undergrad is in English and part of my degree is in law and justice, but I didn't want to be an English teacher. I knew that. I didn't want to do that. I knew early on, and when I got into education and when I started going to school, I knew early on that, one, if I couldn't teach students that looked like me, that were from similar backgrounds that I was from, I didn't want to teach. And two, if I couldn't teach the CTE components, the life skills components, the employability skills components, the 21st century skills components, I didn't want to teach because I felt like those were the things that were so important. And a big part of what got me out of being called bruja, a big part of what got me out of that was the fact that I was able to build relationships with students. And so every educator has to have a secret sauce. And I feel like relationships needs to be the foundation of all of that. Some people just have a knack for, their content and their pedagogy is tight and, and they just do what they do well because they're passionate about science or they're passionate about math and they can teach it in a way that interests students, that makes them perk up. Like they're doing something in CTE or they're able to do project-based learning and connect those content pieces to
Absolutely.
that. But, and all of that's great, but relationships are what develop a student to listen no matter what you're talking about. And I learned that, and I feel like, a lot of people, this non-traditional path that we take, or that I've taken, I feel like it has benefited me so richly. And I remember feeling like, oh, if I would have did this so long ago, if I would have did this then, if I would have just made these different decisions. But the avenue that I took, it has been so much of a learning experience for me. Like it's so much more rewarding than to me what a traditional path would look like. And you mentioned something earlier. You were talking about, when you see the 60-year-old mom in the class with the 18-year-old student, and that was me. I wasn't 60, but I had been out of school for a significant amount of time. I was 26. And so now I'm in school with people who just graduated. But the investment was so much different. The appreciation for what was being taught was so much different, because I didn't necessarily appreciate the education that I was getting before, because it was almost like it wasn't a privilege, it was a right.
Took it for granted.
Right, I took it for granted. And so, being in that classroom, I feel like having those opportunities and seeing those younger people and looking at them and saying, that used to be me. That used to be me. It just made me look at things so much differently, and the trajectory that I took. And I remember before you were saying how, my move up in terms of getting into administration and all of that, like, was the fastest that you had ever seen. And, when I think about your story and I think about mine, and you moved up significantly quickly as well. And, I'm reading this book called The 7-Figure Educator, and she talks about being the, 2%. Her name is Erica Thomas Jordan, or Erica Jordan Thomas. I'm not sure which one, but she talks about being the 2% and seeing yourself as the 2%. And that's how I see us. And not that I'm bragging on who we are, but when I think back over the journey and think about how I got here, the things that I had to go through, the things that I had to fight through, but I did it. That, and education has shifted so significantly. And, I was talking to you last night, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but today I woke up and going to teach the class at CCP. And today I'm like, this is why I'm here. Being able to talk to a science teacher who I'm interviewing and now hiring for a position in the fall, and her telling me, what she sees in me and what I brought out in her, reigniting the fire and reassuring her that there are still people who are passionate about our kids, that are still passionate about them truly being all that they can be and educating the whole child. And so, I know we've jumped and skipped around a bunch of places, but, I'm just so grateful for the journey, because we have these different conversations, and I feel like sometimes we get stuck in what is not, and we don't talk enough about what is.
And I have a question for you, but I wanted to make a quick point. You were talking about my quick arrival in administration. I personally did not feel that I was ready to be in the position or situation that I was in, and so I transitioned. I told you I went to Camden County College for a hot second, and came back to the Camden City School District, and they put me at Camden High as an assistant principal. When he made me assistant principal, I think I was 27 years old. And I got to Camden High, and there were still teachers there that taught me, and it was a humbling experience, because I had to find myself in a way that I never expected to have to. Now I know I go into, anywhere I enter into, I expect to be treated or approached or addressed a certain kind of way as an administrator. But I had no idea what that looked like, what that felt like, what that meant at the time that I initially entered into that situation. And so people said things to me that weren't really appropriate.
Today you wouldn't go for it.
People wouldn't do it because the way that I carry myself.
They know they can't.
They know they can't. But I had, in the beginning, I had a teacher step to the door and tell me I needed to take this student with me because they were acting up in class. And you know what I did?
Took the student with
I took that student with me because at the time I wanted to appease that teacher. And now, if that same situation were to happen, the teacher, first of all, they wouldn't say that to me. Nobody would address me that way.
Yep.
But if we had that similar type of situation, I would have some questions for the teacher before we even got to the point of me taking the student away. If the student is not openly defiant, disrespectful, or belligerent to you, and I'm standing here and we're having this conversation, then that changes how I respond to this situation. Where
right, because you got to ask how we got
that's
here.
right. I didn't see any of that, and she just told me I needed to take them, and so I took them. And it was somebody that was at Camden High when I was a student at Camden High, and so without asking any questions, I just took the student with me, and that was actually the first time as I sat in my office, I realized that I am going to have to change how I interact. I'm going to have to change how I present, because I want people to feel like they can depend on me. I want people to feel like they can trust that if I'm in their presence, I'm going to support. But I don't ever want them to think that they can tell me what to do or take advantage of me in a way that demeans my position.
That's right.
And so I'll never forget, I had a conversation with Miss Jamal, and I explained to her what happened, and she said, "Boy, don't ever let nobody do that to you." And
Mama J.
And so, you know, that was one of those experiences that just kind of shifted, you know, my whole mindset. And I had to have those experiences because, like I said, I didn't feel like I was fully ready to be in that situation. And at the time, if you would have asked me if I was ready, I would have said absolutely. I would have, you know, tooth and nail, I'm ready to be in this position, not understanding what the position meant, not understanding what that position carried, not understanding how many people wanted to be in the position. I just felt like I was ready at the time. And just through who I worked with and the work that I did, it made it clear that, you know, I had a lot to learn. And
but you were willing.
Yeah. And I was blessed to learn from people that, you know, were willing to, you know, train me up and push me and move me in a way that allowed me to, you know, kind of grow and learn, you know, on the job, because, you know, everybody's not willing to have that situation exist. And so, like you said, I was willing, and I made it clear. And this is my last statement before I ask you the question. But we would have a end of the day meeting every single day. And this is again with Mama J. And we would go around the table and everybody would kind of talk about their day and talk about, you know, what went on. And every single time when it got to me, before I said anything else, I would look around at the team, and I was at a table of, you know,
well established,
some of the, in my opinion, some of the best to, you know, to
ever do it.
Grace the city of Camden with their expertise and passion. And you know, I told everybody, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just happy to be here. And it's like a running joke now when I see Mama J now. She asked me how I'm doing, and I tell her I'm just happy to be here. And so that was my experience. I got to learn from a lot of the people around me that had been doing it for a little while, were very well established in what they were doing, had a lot of experience. And so I'm always been willing to learn from. I had a lot of teachers that were willing to show me the ropes and, you know, kind of walk me through some things. I had Mr. Montez, Money Mont, used to pull me in and have conversations with me about how to best support or manage some of the people that were in his department, because
he knew them.
There were people who were looking to take advantage of me. And so I always kept my ears open and did more listening than I did talking.
And, you know, and I'm going to let you ask your question, but I think that it's important to say that I'm just happy to be here is not just a statement like that is a declaration of humility. That is a declaration of, you know, I understand that there were other people who may have been more qualified, who may have put more time in, who very well may be in this seat, but I'm appreciating the opportunity and I'm willing to do what it takes to stay here.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times now, the shifts that we see in education, that humility is gone. That humility has turned into entitlement.
Entitlement and arrogance.
And arrogance, right. And I'm not willing to learn because I'm here, not because of what I know or what I've done, but who I know and who put me in this spot. And I think that has made a huge difference in educating our students in the present day.
And I didn't have any relationships that put me in that position. I had a conversation. I actually had the opportunity to do a presentation when I was at Camden County And it just so happened that at the time I did the presentation, the at the time current superintendent was in the presentation, came to me and asked, had I ever thought about being in public education? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, and 2 months later, I was at Camden High. So all of that being said, you made a statement about the type of student or the population that when you first got into this, you were looking to be able to impact. And so I know now that you've had a lot of different opportunities. You've been in a lot of different arenas. You've been in front of a lot of different people. And so has that changed? You know, has it shifted from looking to impact this particular group now? Has your horizon broadened to, you know, encompass more? Is it now about what you can do or who you can impact instead of not necessarily looking at just a particular group? And when you think about, I know this is a lot. When you think about you know, that person that you were when you made that that initial expectation of yourself going into education, is that still who you see yourself as now?
A huge part of me, I'll say yes. And because the higher you go, the more you see, the more you learn. And I've seen so much of the politics of education and how and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in other neighborhoods with students that don't look like us, but I see people capitalizing off of the situation more often than not where our students are. And so not necessarily, it may not be for the same reasons now, but I do still feel that way because there has to be somebody who's willing to fight for what's right, who's willing to fight for what is equal and equitable for our students. And so back then it may have been like, I feel like these kids need me. I see myself in them. And now it's more so, I feel like these students need me because I feel like they're being taken advantage of. I feel like people are capitalizing off of a system and doing active harm to students. And because it's no longer about our kids, it's about them. It's about the ego. It's about how this position, this title makes me feel. And so, yes, I still feel that way. Would I be open to other opportunities and teaching other people and broadening my horizons? Absolutely. Because I have a growth mindset. So if an opportunity presented itself where because I feel like the type of educator that I am, the type of educator that you are, and the type of educator that I would hire, I feel like every child can benefit from those people, from the qualities and the character that we're looking for in those people. So, you know, I feel like I would take advantage of an opportunity to, you know, spread my wings a bit further, so to speak, and see what I can do in other, you know, neighborhoods with other demographic students. But I do still feel strongly that where I'm needed most is with the population of students that look like me.
And that's it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to understand when you either don't understand education or don't understand where we're from.
Absolutely.
And so when we look at you know, things as simple as how some of the schools are set up now, it's not necessarily about creating situations or dynamics that are best for the student. It's about funneling resources in a way that best meets the needs of that particular organization. And so does education happen? Absolutely. But to go around the people in the community, not include, you know, the people across the street, so to speak, and create this dynamic in the community that is not really for the community. Does it serve community students? Absolutely. But it's not really for the community. And so, yeah, they do some nice t-shirts and, you know, book bags and things of that nature. But is it really for the
student,
the
the community,
the students and the population that, you know, they're in? And it's hard because now we're getting to a place where They're starting to hire people that now more often look like the students that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't change their drivers. It doesn't change who's making the big decisions.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I got into education. I got into education almost by accident. I stayed in education because I loved it. And now I'm trying to move forward in education because I believe that there is a necessity for people like us to make sure that the students that look like us, the Black and brown students, have the supports and are put in the situations for them to be able to be successful. And so, I knew you were going to respond the way that you did, but I wanted you to say it. I believe that every student deserves the opportunity to learn. I believe that every student deserves, a situation where they can thrive, where they can excel. But I feel like my purpose is to make sure that a specific population
thrives.
It not just thrives because when we talk about just thriving, it's the possibility of a lot of them, getting left behind.
Absolutely.
We want, and I know that this is a conversation that we have on a regular basis. We want to create situations where students who wouldn't have had the opportunity are now getting it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a traditional way.
No.
The more I learn and the more that, we have conversations about other things that are available, because, I talk about all this CTE stuff, and you haven't said it yet, but you're just as much CTE as me. You might be more CTE than me because you started in CTE. It's like I had to get there. I had to experience different things, have some, situations with students that may have had disabilities and weren't thriving in the traditional math and science situation, but then found that thing that aha thing, that light bulb
that
thing.
Eureka moment.
That's right. Where that was where you started.
Yeah.
And you started, not only did you start in CTE, but you started in an untraditional way. You started
Completely.
Because you found out that was something that you could do. You found out that you had a niche for something that was something that was much needed, and you were good at it, in a lot of situations better at it than people who went to school to be able to do it. And so
I took one class in graphic design in Camden County College, and but when prior to even taking that class, I had brought with me skills that I already had, and I was YouTube University. Like you weren't going to keep me from the information. And so I know what that can do for a person. If it were not for that, like I said, I don't know that I would be sitting here as Dr. Ebony Thompson. I don't know, because that opened the door for me to say that there's more. I had no real direction. Like I said, I was selling furniture and I was doing okay, but it wasn't the life that I wanted. I knew that I didn't want to continue to do that. Who wants to stand on their feet for 10 hours all day, running people down back and forth, trying to sell them a couch? I knew that I didn't want to do that. It was a temporary situation, but I didn't have a permanent fix. And so, divine intervention will put me at Woodrow Wilson that day, to have that meeting with the principal, to be able to create a situation where I was able to be in a school teaching, and it was natural. It wasn't like it was organic. It wasn't like I had to try hard. Again, I had, my moments where I had to learn, but they were moments that passed very quickly. I remember Mr. Rulan, he would come and he would observe, and I would be teaching the class and he would be like, he said, it's unbelievable how well she teaches and manages class. And, even when I was at Olney, being called out to do national seminars for classroom management by the national individuals that were coming to audit the program. And these weren't things that I was taught. And I'm not bragging on myself, because I don't take credit for it, because these are things that are innate in me that God put in me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the compassion and the empathy and the love that I have for students and the desire for them to be successful, because I know what it feels like to have a teacher who tells you, I don't care what you think, or no one cares what you think.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I had worked with you at Camden High. Had the opportunity to see what you were, in a lot of ways capable of, but there was always another teacher in the classroom with you. And so, at Woodrow Wilson, you had Mr. Burgos, and then at Camden High, you had Miss McCrae. And so, I knew that you were competent, but I didn't have a full grasp of the breadth of work that you were capable of doing. And I was just kind of laughing to myself because I was trying to get my buddy, Mr. Pagan, to come over to Almy.
Oh, Rick.
And I had him. And he said, Brother Thompson, I just can't because, I'm going to come out of my pension. And I was like, oh man, what are we going to do? Like, I don't know, how we're going to kind of make this program work without
and that was
somebody.
The pilot year.
Yeah. And that was the first year. And I knew that he was able to build relationships with kids. I had gotten to see him through school-based youth services, build relationships with some of the toughest kids. And so I'm like, who am I going to get that's going to be able to do this? And so after a little back and forth, must have been maybe 3 weeks before school started, Dr. Patterson comes to me and says, I have somebody. You know who it is, and I want you to keep an open mind because she's never led the classroom herself, but she is, I feel like she's, perfect for this. And here you are. Here you are. And so, just an opportunity like that, the way that things happen, you weren't the first person that I came to, but clearly it was meant for you. This, I couldn't imagine anybody else coming in and being for that program what you were. We don't get it off the ground the way that we did if it wasn't for somebody who had, the passion and the drive that you did to really establish yourself, not just in education, but in the school, building relationships with the students. And so it really gets to the core of what it means to be an educator. When I think back about some of my first classes, I only halfway knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like I ran my halfway hard. It was like I made sure that when I was planning, I was keeping my students in mind. I made sure that I was having conversations with some of the teachers that I saw, really successful with their classes. There was a lot of veteran teachers at Pine Point when I got there, and so I had a lot of people that I was able to pull from. And so that, kind of getting into the flow of things, for me, it was pretty easy. But for you, your first real go at this was leaving working in a city that basically, kind of molded you to that point, to be who
where
you
I knew
are.
some of the kids' parents and
some of the parents,
or grew up with some of them.
You know a lot of the staff, a lot of the administration. You had people that you could turn to in the community if there was something that you wanted to accomplish. And so, I did that. I did that going there as a principal, where I had leverage to be able to, kind of make things the way that I wanted them to be. But you did that. You did that coming in as a teacher. And so I want you to, just kind of tell me a little bit about, what that number one, the experience of that transition, kind of coming into it that way, taking on your classroom for the first time and, being able to lead it by yourself, and how that really molded where you saw yourself. What did that do to the trajectory of where you saw yourself going from that point forward?
So, even before I left Camden, because I was in Camden for 7 years before I went to Philly, but even before I left Camden, I have to acknowledge that I was able to sit in meetings with, at the administrative team and, Mr. Richards' cabinet, and, Ms. Gay Brown, Ms. Buffalo. And so I was able to sit in meetings with them where I don't think that, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe a lot of people had the privilege to do that. So I learned very early on, even before leading my own classroom, that this is the decision-making room. And not necessarily just like because, not in the essence of just being a leader, just being an administrator, this being their building or, Mr. Richards' building, but this is where, if you want to make impact, this is where you have to go. And that's not saying that that teachers don't have a say or people don't listen to them. But when you want to make systemic change, you have to have a seat at the table. And, and I had a seat at the table. And while I may not have had a plate at the dinner table, I had a seat and I could listen, and I might not have been able to partake in the meal, but I was able to be a part of the conversation, and even if it was just to have my ears open. And so, I think that was a big decision maker for me. And early on, I was like, once I had enough of those conversations and I sat in enough of those meetings and I listened to how they went and I heard the conversations and, decisions that were being made, I didn't just want to be an assistant principal. I didn't just want to be the principal. I wanted to be a superintendent, because I was like, that's where the difference is made. It comes from the top. And so I think having that mindset, leaving Camden, going to Philly, kind of having the path laid for me and that mentally, I think that helped me a lot. And so I didn't want to do anything halfway because I knew that if that's where I was going, then I needed to work the way I'm going to need to work now. And so, and I don't even know if the thought, if the fullness of mind was there to really think what I'm articulating now, but I know that was the goal. And so when I got to Philly, first of all, what I appreciated about my journey is that, I've seen teachers go in front of students who don't care, who will present any kind of way, physically and, pedagogically. And so I wanted to be something different holistically for them. I always felt like in certain spaces that educators didn't get enough respect for the work that they do, but we educate all the professions of the world, but we don't get that respect. But I also acknowledge the fact that we didn't get it because some of us aren't demanding it. Some of us are getting up out of bed and coming to work like we just got up out of bed. And so when I got to Philly, I took that as an opportunity, and the way it happened, the way things unfolded, like you said, so unconventionally, I couldn't just, take that for granted. I couldn't just get up and act like that was happening every day because it wasn't. And the fact that I knew that someone else was outfitted for that job and I ended up with it just months. I don't even think it was months after I got my bachelor's degree. After I graduated from Rowan. And, and so, going into, I never even thought about being in a different city. That never crossed my mind, even though there are there are a lot of differences with, kids in Philadelphia and kids in Camden, just because of the way, the makeup of the city and how large Philly is. And so I saw a different kind of independence a lot of times, but I never thought about them as being any different. And so going into the classroom, I was teaching me. And I remember the first day, first of all, I was so nervous. And every year after, and I appreciated that because that kept me humble. That kept me humble. And being nervous, it let me know I never wanted to go in front of them and prepare and be unprepared. And for them to feel like I didn't care enough about them to do the work to really make this a learning experience for them. And I feel like every time they walked in my class, it was an experience. And that's what I wanted for them. And so I remember when I first got to Ollie and, we were at campus and I had prepared and, and did my due diligence. And I had one student that first day, one student, because it was an alternative program. And so, a lot of people would have looked at it like, oh, I got this one kid. I'm just going, I'm going to wing it. No, I did not. I went in there and presented like every seat was filled because she deserved that. She showed up. And so because she showed up, I showed up. And so I remember when she left the classroom, her name was Erica, and she left the classroom. I heard her hollering down the hall, yo, we got a real teacher in here. And so, and all I could do was laugh. But I've always been taught that even in an audience of one, and, and to pull it in, biblically, Jesus went for the one. The woman at the well was the one. And so if he went for the one, how are we going to, despise small audiences, humble beginnings? And so I've always had that humility, because how I got here is such a blessing, and it's such a testament to, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. And so, while I had these dreams of grandeur, of being this attorney that was going to wear these red bottoms, I ended up being somebody powerful, but somebody powerful in the eyes of people. And I'm not saying that attorneys don't matter in the people in the eyes that they matter in, but I ended up being so powerful and impactful to people who, in my opinion, if they get what you're giving them and you give it fully without any reservation, and you give all that you have, it can be the difference between life and death for them. And so that's how I always looked at it, because we see these young people getting killed. You've lost students. I've lost students. And so, I have to go in there every day understanding that what I say to them, good or bad, could change the trajectory of their lives in a positive or a negative way. So it's my business to go and make sure that I tell them something that's going to save their life. And so I hope that answered your question.
It definitely did. And I make, as I lead, as I, work with students, I make a lot of reference to sports. And as we were talking just now, this is something, I'm trademarking this, don't nobody use this. I am going to start preparing my team, my teachers, other educators in the building, support services, preparing them with a game plan for the school year, for the students that we're serving. And it's like
a playbook.
You would never go into a game without people knowing the plays. You would never go into a game without having a game plan. You would never go into a game without thorough preparation. But on a regular basis, a lot of educators go into the situation that way. And, not always for the same reasons, but it happens regularly. And so, I always try to push myself to kind of figure out how I make a situation a little bit better. I've been places where, teachers do their job, but the culture is not great. And so, like, my goal becomes, building the culture, getting people to have better relationships. I've been places where the culture is great, but there's not a lot of positive things happening in the classroom where they need to happen. And so,
there has to be a balance.
Has to be a balance.
There has to be a balance.
It's like, so I have to figure out how to make what happens in the classroom important. I have to figure out, what makes it tick. And so, just thinking back to, how I got into it and why I do what I do, really, thinking about what my why is. It comes down to, like you said, impact. And the more people I can impact in a positive way, the better it is. I had a significant impact when I was in Philly, because I had, at its peak, over 2,000 students. When I was in my first tenure at Camden High School, over 1,000 students, almost 1,200. Um, you know, and so understanding that while a teacher has the direct impact of the student that they're in front of, it's like I'm responsible for making sure that that experience that they have with that teacher is something that's thorough.
Mm-hmm.
That teacher is ready every single day to do their job and be the best they can possibly be. And so while I'm not necessarily teaching those students, I'm guiding how they're taught.
Absolutely.
And so my goal has consistently become, creating an atmosphere that allows teachers to be able to be successful. Making sure that the climate in the building is something that, really harbors positivity and creates that atmosphere that allows a teacher to be successful. Because when you have, positive, happy teachers,
you have positive, happy students.
You get positive, happy students. And so that expectation, transitions into the students getting what they need and being able to move forward. And so, that's kind of where my mind has shifted to in my leadership. And I agree about the idea that the higher up you go, the more impact you have, the more, your vision gets to be how things are carried out. And so I'd like to eventually get into a superintendent's position, or even transition, a little bit later on when I'm not necessarily so directly looking forward to being in front of students every single day, maybe even back to the state to impact things from that perspective.
Right. I think that the bottom line is, whatever we do, wherever we find ourselves, and I this is something that I focus on, that I am, diligent in producing. Wherever we find ourselves, we are to be the best at what we are, because it's not about us, and I think that it has become, and I often say, it's not about us for me, but it is personal. And I think in many arenas, it's become personal in the wrong kind of way. And so, my goal is always, no matter what room I'm in, no matter who I'm in front of, that I'm making a positive impact, a lasting impression, because at this level now, it's not just about turning a student off to education. Now it's about turning adults off to teaching if you approach it the wrong way. And, and so I've seen administrators be successful at handling that duality, and I've seen them not be so successful, because some people don't have that balance, don't understand that while you are responsible for everything that happens with the student, while you are responsible for making this experience meaningful and in a holistic educational approach, you're also responsible for developing adults to be able to handle that task,
to provide that.
Right. And so when it's done well, it can be beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, and when it's done poorly, the most vulnerable people suffer. And that's our students. And I think a lot of conversations we have are I, we, and meaning adults. We're no longer, providing an experience for students. We're now providing something that is more palatable, because we just need to get people in the door. And I think that we need to get away from that, because at the end of the day, like I said, our students suffer. This, I said to someone today after concluding an interview, I signed up for this. I signed a contract. I committed to this work. The students who come to us, they didn't. They don't have a choice. They don't choose whether or not they're going to be there. Whether, some days they may, but they don't choose whether or not they're going to be enrolled in this school. They don't choose whether this is their learning environment or not. That choice is made for them. But I made a choice to be here. So I have a mandate to fulfill every obligation under that contract, to be what I need to be for our kids, and to make sure whomever has also signed the contract is doing the same. And if they're not, being able to say, I don't think this is for you.
And I think we both experienced working with people who their vision doesn't necessarily align with ours. They may not have the same investment in seeing the student succeed for whatever reason, But the challenge becomes not allowing their biases, their issues, their situations to dim your light in the work that you know you need to do to see those students succeed. And so it's I sit here and I say it, like it's easy to do, and it's not.
It's not.
It's not. When you're dealing with an adult, especially when that individual has a level of authority that you report to them,
right?
Or you're responsible to sometimes take their vision and carry it out,
right?
But they really don't have a vision, or their vision is not pure and purpose for what we're trying to accomplish, or where we're trying to take the students that we serve.
Absolutely.
And so taking that situation and not letting it sour how we operate, how we move forward, how we interact, because it's not always easy to deal with somebody who presents that way or addresses you that way, or you have those types of interactions with, and then you have to turn around and face your staff and
feel defeated.
Yeah, but can't show it.
Right.
Can't show it. It's like you basically just going to war for what you believe is right, and because this person has that additional authority, it's like you can't do what you know you need to do or what you know is best, and so you have to turn around and face the staff and figure out how to make something that you don't even believe in palatable, so that we're still, to the best of our ability, supporting students and moving them forward. And
absolutely,
we could be doing it so much better if we did it the way that we
with
felt,
integrity.
That's right. We felt was really putting them first.
Right.
But taking that situation and still figuring out how you present it, on a platter, make it palatable for the people who have to go and face those students every day. And so
I'll wrap up with this. In that situation, you have to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm either going to be bitter,
mm-hmm.
and my bitterness is going to impede me making somebody better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's teachers,
mm-hmm.
and that's students. And so all day, I'm going to choose to make somebody better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make that choice because,
mm-hmm.
like I said, I chose this.
Mm-hmm.
There are people we impact, and we're
mm-hmm.
privileged to impact,
mm-hmm.
that didn't get that choice.
That's right.
So that is all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed watching, and come see us again.